Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
And a good Friday morning to you. It's 5:06 here, and we made it the last Friday of July. Patrice on Luca.
Oh, my goodness. You're right, Larry.
28th day of July. This is it. We're done. Starting next time you're in here for a, what do you call it?
Friday.
Yeah, Friday. It will be August.
And I already see the back-to-school stuff. I mean...
Stop.
I know.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thanks for joining us
Merry
today.
Christmas.
Coming up, yeah, exactly. Get your shopping early. Coming up later this morning, we've got a pretty loaded show, and I'm pretty excited about it. At 7:05, Bill Wolf running for state senate in Virginia against Danica Rum down there in the 30th District, Prince William County and such. We'll talk to Bill Wolf. And then at 8:05, you might want to hear this conversation. The mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser.
Wow.
It's been a while since we've had Mayor Bowser on the program. Yeah, but I got to say, there are some things that Bowser and I have agreed upon over the years.
Okay.
And today there's something very cool happening with the old RFK Stadium site.
Oh, yeah.
That we're going to be focusing on with her. And then at 8:35, Byron York, Washington Examiner, on more developments in the Hunter Biden plea deal. I'm Larry O'Connor. As mentioned, that is Patrice Onwuka. Did you see yesterday that Tim Scott had a prayer breakfast? Congressmen often have. First, we got the national prayer breakfast thing going on, but then a lot of politicians have their own prayer breakfast, either in their home state or here in D.C., and especially if you're a senator running for president, as Tim Scott is. And as I've mentioned before, he's sort of occupied. There's always one candidate out of the Republican Party that occupies that faith and values and family issues lane, and Scott is definitely filling that lane, I think.
Well, that and Vice President
Pence, correct. They're both vying for that
They're
lane.
vying for it, yeah.
I think Scott's the one who's filling it. But, so he had a prayer breakfast, and Nancy Mace, Congresswoman from South Carolina. In fact, I think Mace sits in Scott's old seat, if I remember right.
So.
When Scott was a congressman before he became a senator, Nancy Mace showed up at the prayer breakfast and raised some eyebrows with this introduction.
On this together, another year, another standing room only event. And when I woke up this morning at 7, I was getting picked up at 7:45. Patrick, my fiance, tried to pull me by my waist over this morning in bed, and I was like, no, baby, we don't got time for that this morning. I got to get to the prayer breakfast, and I got to be on time, and a little TMI, but he can wait. I'll see him later tonight. But I was here.
So
Did you notice? It was like a pin drop in there.
I think people's mouths were agape. It's like
they were looking at each other
read
like,
read the room,
Congresswoman.
Yeah. And again, I think I like Nancy Mace. I do like that she's very outspoken and
She's
just
principled.
She's sort of a YOLO person. She's just going to say what's on her mind, and that's good. But at a prayer breakfast, talking about how your not husband, fiance, is pulling you back into bed for a little morning shtup, and then you say, no, I got to go to a prayer breakfast. Can't be having sex this morning with my boyfriend because I have to go to a prayer breakfast, but don't worry, he'll get his tonight. I don't know if that's necessarily the best for him.
She did not read the room. She absolutely didn't. It would be one thing if you were talking to young staffers, or even if you were a women's event, that might fly, but not at a prayer breakfast when you're trying to demonstrate your Christian conservative family values.
Funny you should say that, because she saw this sort of take off yesterday in the afternoon. The video on social media certainly got quite a bit of attention, and people were commenting on it. This is what I kind of like about her.
Okay.
She owns it. She retweeted the video, and she said, I go to church because I'm a sinner, not a saint.
That's a good response.
She said, glad those in attendance, including Senator Scott and my pastor, took the joke in stride. Pastor Greg and I will have extra to talk about on Sunday.
Oh, boy. Well, it sounds like I hope they're doing premarital counseling.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm sure there's at least one session dedicated to those things that are left for marriage, the marriage bed.
I think when Christians demonstrate that we are not prudes, that is a good sign. Obviously, anyone who listens to this program knows that I am not a prude. Yet at the same time, as you put it, read the room. I mean, there is appropriate... let me just put it this way. I don't think I would make that joke at a prayer. And I, as you know, Patrice, I have a very low bar for appropriateness. And what I can say in certain settings.
Here's the thing. Okay, she said, and my fiance tried to bring me. That's when she should have caught herself or thought, well, there's nobody laughing. Yeah. So let me pivot real quick. So I just jumped in the car and I got here because you know what was on my mind? This is and then she could have pivoted to what she wanted to talk about. Yeah. But she kind of dug in. And then she was thinking that the audience was going to kind of jump in and start to come along with her, and they kind of didn't.
So let me point out one other dynamic here, because our show, I think our conversation every morning, whether it's you and me, Patrice, or me and Julie, or Mercedes, whoever here is with us on Thursday, part of the dynamic is the male-female perspective, obviously. And even though we agree on so much, we approach it differently because I'm a man and you're a woman.
Yeah.
Let me point this out. First of all, her fiance is several years older than her.
Okay.
All right. So if a man of a certain age, let's say an older gentleman, congressman, was joking about his young fiance in bed this morning, pulling him back in for a little morning treat, and he says to his young female fiance, "Not right now, baby. I got to get me to the prayer breakfast." Do you think that would be okay? I think she's getting away with this a little bit because she's a woman.
Well, from let's think about the audience. The audience would never let either get away. Even if it was a young male member and an older cougar fiance, it's still, I don't think it would fly. Now, in the political realm, that I think is where the difference would come in, where the male-female dynamic would play a role. And I think that's why the story's picking up steam.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think in the political realm, even though it's probably more common for a older congressman to have a young wife,
fiance,
they don't talk about it openly and make jokes about it. Where she is, true. I just don't think a male congressman joking about it. Take the age dynamic out of it. Just a male congressman joking about having sex outside of marriage on his way to a prayer breakfast would be greeted with any kind of, oh, well, that's just Congressman Mace.
That's true. I mean, an interesting element to this story, though, is consider the host. I like Tim Scott quite a lot. I've told my story about being at Fox News in the green room when they were shutting down everything March 2020, and I was like 8 months pregnant, and that congressman said, "Let me get you to your car, make sure you're okay, I don't want your water to break," kind of thing. So he's very nice. But it's interesting that no one talks about his family life.
Well, I mean, it came up a little bit when he first announced, but what you're pointing out is that he is not married, and we don't know anything about his personal life, significant others, or who he has. Well, that's because he's married to his job.
Which is
if Tim Scott becomes president, his bride will be the nation.
That's good.
That should work for us.
That should work for us.
Well, and you're right. If Senator Scott was fine with this, and if her pastor was fine, who am I to judge?
It's an interesting story.
It's just an odd little moment, a quirky little moment, and I'm just glad that of all people, I'm not the one who said the most inappropriate thing on the program so far. And of course, the message of that song is: we've seen all this violence, we've seen all these riots, we've seen all the people sucker punching women on the sidewalk and all of this stuff, and it's all happening in New York, San Francisco, D.C. And Jason Aldean says to his country fans, "Try that in a small town." Now that message has been greeted with cries of racism, of celebrating and glorifying violence, and all this stuff. By the way, let's not forget that just earlier this week, Mayor Bowser, who will be on this program a little later, admonished people in D.C. who are in charge of valet parking stands, because keys are getting stolen from valet parking stands. And apparently she said, well, listen, this ain't Mayberry, which suggests, you wouldn't get away with that in a small town. Kind of Jason Aldean's message here. Well, anyway, Jason Aldean, as it turns out, appeared right here locally at Meriwether Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland. Our friend Matt Foley, of course, who is a regular guest on the program here, and ran for Congress in Maryland 6 for the Republican nomination last time around. He was there. I saw him posting on videos on social media, along with Greg Price, a friend who I believe we've also had on the program. He was a huge Jason Aldean fan. Apparently it was MAGA night out in Columbia, Maryland. I keep telling you there were a lot of Republicans in Maryland. And you don't believe me. Well, they were all out to see Jason Aldean last night. The turnout was great. You get some of the videos from the parking lot where everybody were flying FJB flags, if you know what I mean, and doing the chant that you hear at NASCAR races, "Let's go Brandon." But they did it in the original lyrics of "Let's go Brandon," and apparently it was an incredibly electric night last night.
Quiet from the perspective of police were prepared for protesters to be there.
Oh yeah,
and no one showed up. I mean,
right.
It's so interesting, the double standard with music, where Jason Aldean is considered racist and promoting violence. You ever listen to hop over to like 105 point whatever and listen to some of the latest hip hop,
some
and
of the
rap
urban
and
hip hop
R&B?
stations in town?
Are you kidding me?
There's a whole lot of violence in those songs, usually directed at either the girlfriends, wives, or cops.
Thank you. A lot of misogynistic violence and just plain out, okay, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to jack you, I'm going to, do all of these things. And so, listen, this is manufactured outrage, and it's meant to be politicized. That is all it is. It's to divide us and to make anyone who is a country singer and supportive of him, Jason Aldean, seem like an untouchable MAGA supporter.
Yeah.
And that's just ridiculous. Let music unify people, and then the actual violent stuff, let those be the outliers.
And let's remember, this is Columbia. This is, 15 miles from Baltimore, right?
Oh, you want to talk about violence. Larry, can I tell you a quick one?
Yeah.
My husband and I were up in Baltimore looking at a couple properties, right? We were with a real estate agent, and I was about to go to the basement. And then I saw something like flash through reflected on the basement window.
You saw a ghost?
I thought it was a cat. I was about to go down. And then I heard a shuffle. And I said, "Hello? Hello?" And then it's like, "Hi." It was
You had a squatter in the
squatter in the house that we were looking at.
That's terrifying.
And listen, we exercise our Second Amendment rights, and I'll just put it that way.
All right.
And so did our real estate agent. But trust me, I've been through Baltimore and some of the surrounding areas, and violence is a real thing.
This is why we love the Onwukas. I need you guys to be my, whenever I'm going into town, I need you to have my back, cover my six. Well, no, of course. There's more violence in downtown Baltimore than you're ever going to see at a Jason Aldean concert, as was shown last night. And as the local television station in Baltimore pointed out, if the turnout at Merriweather Thursday is any indication, Aldean's popularity has not been affected by this controversy. If anything, I have never heard of Jason Aldean until all of this. So.
I had heard of him before, but now I might start listening to his music.
There you go. It's 5:21. One of my favorite songs. Listen to this lyric. You can spend all your love making time. Oh, what a great voice. What a great performance. What a great lyric. What a great song. Take It to the Limit from the Eagles. One of the top hits from the Eagles, not written and performed by Glenn Frey or Don Henley. That was Randy Meisner, one of the founding members of the Eagles. He was the bass player and stayed with the group right up until about, I think, 1979. Everybody in that group fought with each other and yelled at each other.
Well, isn't that true of every musical group?
Especially in the 70s.
Except the Jacksons.
Especially with... Well, I bet they yelled at each other. They just didn't
Not
break
with
it.
Joe around.
No, he was the only one yelling. And with the alcohol and with the egos and with the money and with personalities like Don Henley and Glenn Frey. He ended up leaving the group. He passed away yesterday, age of 76. Just another, we've reached that point where all of these legendary rock and roll icons are starting to pass away, right? Though, I mean, he lived 76, not bad, but you'd hope that people get into their 80s or their 90s at this point.
Well, if you've been in music and been popular.
Well, I think you mentioned yesterday when we mentioned the tragic premature passing of Sinead O'Connor.
Yeah.
It's like, generally speaking, when you're in that business, you don't always have a long life.
Exactly.
Here's Randy Meisner again. The Eagles, just the sound of multiple generations, frankly, in the soundtrack. You can put out an Eagles greatest hits song, put the top down, and drive anywhere in the summer, and you're a happy person if you're my age. So that's one of those passings that sort of marks sort of a moment in an era where you say, oh, dang. Meanwhile, Mick Jagger just turned 80. So, and I'm sorry,
still moving.
Don't tell me Randy Meisner. Well, he lived a hard life. He was a rock star in the 70s. Mick Jagger, for crying out loud. Not to mention Keith Richards. It's like, what the hell is going on? Nothing will kill these guys.
Well, I don't know. They figured out the fountain to life, or they took the right kind of stuff. I don't know. One of the two.
Well,
or maybe they found Jesus, and that could be the third option.
Maybe
exercise. I don't know.
Rest in peace, Randy Meisner, and thank you for your that just pure voice of yours and that lyric. You can spend all your time making money, or you can spend all your love making time. Come on,
that's beautiful. Actually,
it's 5:29.
Now on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36, and we're chugging along here on a Friday morning. You made it to the weekend. It's going to be a hot one. Stick with us. We're going to have a hot show as well. Coming up at 7:05, Bill Wolf running for Senate against Danica Rum in the 30th State District. 8:05, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, because it looks like we finally have a plan for the RFK Stadium site.
I'm excited.
It looks pretty cool, actually.
Okay.
And Republicans in Congress are on board. They're actually partnering with Muriel Bowser on this. 8:35, Byron York, Washington Examiner, on the Biden scandals. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Patrice Onwuka. Remember, Patrice, after the midterms, when we had all the Eeyore Republicans, we should have done better, and we should have gotten 20 seats in the House and everything. And you're right. I would have loved to have had a bigger majority.
Sure.
But I was telling everybody, all you need is a one-seat majority, and that's the game changer. Because then you get the gavel, then you get the committees, then you get subpoena power, then you get the investigations, and you get the hearings that you want.
And real oversight.
That's right. And all of these things that we've seen here from Comer, from Jordan, from Smith in Ways and Means, it's all because we got that majority. But it goes well beyond just investigations. Yesterday, a subcommittee of the judiciary, headed up by Congressman Mike Johnson of Louisiana, took a look at the medical procedures surrounding so-called gender-affirming care, specifically as it relates to young children, prepubescent children, children who are being blocked from going through the biological natural process of
life.
Adolescence and puberty, blocked and in some cases surgically altered. And they're looking at this because obviously we see states, the state of Virginia attempted to put barriers in place between a parent's rights. And if a parent doesn't affirm a child's gender choice that has been affirmed by a school system, by a public school teacher or by administration, there are states where that child will be taken away from the parents.
Yeah.
Because the state knows best. And so what exactly are they going to do to these kids? You need to hear a lot of this testimony. I want to begin with Congressman Johnson, who began with a video that he had gotten from a podcast featuring a surgeon who actually calls himself queer surgeon. He's got pink hair. And I just want you to hear this.
So 80% or so of my practice is gender affirming surgery. So I do facial, chest surgery, and genital surgery. But the majority of my practice and sort of where my passion lies is really genital surgery cases. So
I'm sorry, there's something really upsetting.
Passion for genital surgery.
Where my passion lies is genital altering surgery.
Yeah.
That's just a disturbing thing on the face of it.
I do a lot of vaginoplasty and a lot of phalloplasty. I would just say they're expanding in either direction. So yeah, a lot of adolescents presenting for surgical intervention, but also a lot of people that are like in their 70s sometimes coming in for genital surgery, and then everything in between. But the adolescents for sure present some unique challenges. Obviously, there's great evidence supporting pubertal suppression for a whole variety of benefits. But the one thing that is very new is genital surgery in someone that has underwent pubertal suppression.
I'm just going to translate here. Genital surgery for somebody under pubertal suppression means it's a child who has been put on hormones and puberty blockers so that they can't progress properly and biologically and scientifically, so that their genitals can reach the development,
maturity and development
that they're supposed
to
in adolescence.
Yeah.
And let's just be clear on let's define our terms here. Puberty and adolescence, we're talking about 12-year-olds.
Yes.
13-year-olds.
Yes.
14-year-olds.
Yes.
And if they're still adolescents, it means they're teenagers, in many cases not adults.
Not so much an issue in someone with assigned female at birth anatomy that undergoes a phalloplasty, because we're creating something with a free tissue transfer, a flap anyway. But a much bigger issue for an individual that's undergoing a penile inversion vaginoplasty. because we use all of that tissue to basically create the vulva as well as line the internal vaginal canal. And as a specialty, those of us that do a fairly high volume of genital gender affirming surgery, we've maybe done a handful of pubertally suppressed adolescents as a field, and no one's published on it yet. OHSU we're just putting our first series together as we're kind of learning and figuring out what works. But it's really changing things because
we haven't, nobody has done a study on this yet. We're just figuring it out and learning as we go along. Patrice, they are experimenting in real time before our eyes on adolescent children, on their genitals. And they're making it up. So they don't know what the long-term effects are going to be.
This is heinous. And if this feels or sounds anything like some of the Frankenstein type of experiments that our U.S. government performed on citizens in this country, like the Tuskegee Airmen.
That's the first thing I thought, not the Airmen, the Tuskegee experiments. Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of when I thought this. And we hear these stories about medical experimentations on people who don't have their full voice, they don't have their full rights. In that case, the African Americans they were injected with syphilis.
They were exactly.
And we learn these horrific things that happened in the middle of the 20th century, and we always say that's an outrage. It could never happen again. It could never happen again.
It's happening right now
because these children don't have their voice. They don't have.
And here's why stories of detransitioners are so important. At Independent Women's Forum, we have a whole series of these because we actually have males who have transitioned and then detransitioned.
Right.
So they've tried to be women and had the surgical procedures. And
then they had regrets.
And they had regrets, Larry. Oh. They are forever patients. There are men who talk about the fact that they have ingrown hairs inside of them. And the kind of, I won't go into graphic details, but it is graphic, painful, and debilitating for these people.
They will never experience a climax in mature sexual relations. They will never be able to be fertile. They are sterilized for life. And you talk about detransitioners, because I don't want to continue with this surgeon anymore. I want you to hear in a moment the testimony of one of those young women, a woman who at 16 years old was convinced by the school system and by doctors that she must transition to a boy. Chloe Cole, we've interviewed her on this program before. She's with IWF as well. You profiled her. She testified yesterday about this, and now the fact that she is now returned to being a girl and how this has altered her life. And you need to hear this, and you will in a I want to remind you that if the midterm elections had not gone the way they did, even by just the 5-seat majority, these hearings would not have happened
That's
yesterday.
Right. Absolutely
There's
not.
one political party who wants to talk this through, expose what's going on, and have a very real, transparent conversation. And one party wants this all to happen without any public scrutiny. All right, Chloe Cole, she's now 19 years old, and she is suing the medical system that put her through this. I said that she had this procedure when she was 16. That's when the surgery happened. She actually began transition at 12 years old. As a 12-year-old girl, she was advised that she was born in the wrong body, which, by the way, nobody is born in the wrong body.
God doesn't make mistakes.
You're born in the body that you're born in. Now, whether that means there's other stuff going on with you that is causing any level of psychological depression or what have you, that should be treated as it is, but not with these drastic measures, not based on what we're learning now. And Chloe Cole talked about her experience now retransitioning or coming back to being a girl, and how her life is forever altered now for the rest of her life because of this decision that was made against her will. When you're 16, you can't consent. It's impossible. If you can't consent, well, I don't want to get into the details. On the panel was a mother who was dealing with this right now, because this mother is supporting the transition of her child, because she has been told that if you don't do this, your child will kill himself.
Well, I understood that Mrs. Reynolds is scared for her child. And I just want to set the record straight that I don't hate her. I don't think anybody in this room hates her. In fact, I see my own mother and my own father in her, and that clearly she dearly loves her child, and she's doing the best with what she's been given. And unfortunately, it's not much. And for that, I'm sorry. I mean, I think every parent deserves the utmost grace and guidance with how to help their child. That being said, I don't wish for her child to have the same result as I did. I don't wish for anybody to regret transition or to detransition because it's incredibly difficult. It comes with its own difficulties, and it's not easy. And I hope that her child gets to have a happy and fulfilling adulthood.
Yeah, really powerful moment there
Yeah.
on the stand. A Chloe Coles fan. That's why we loved having her. I think we've had her on the program a couple of times. All right. Also, we talked on this hearing. We also talked about, or they talked about, I should say, the issue of women's sports and trying to protect women's sports.
Sure, yeah.
And there's a lot of angles to that, of course, in terms of the competitive nature of it, the advantage that biological men are going to have competing against women. Paula Scanlon was on the University of Pennsylvania swimming team with Leah Thomas.
Yes.
She spoke quite eloquently about the other aspect of this, which is biological men. And by the way, Leah Thomas is fully biologically
he's not transitioned.
intact as a man with male equipment. And by the way, is still sexually attracted and engaged with women. Mm-hmm. And here's Paula Scanlon talking about the locker room.
What you do not know is the experiences of the women on the University of Pennsylvania swim team. My teammates and I were forced to undress in the presence of Leah, a 6'4" tall biological male, fully intact with male genitalia, 18 times per week. Some girls opted to change in bathroom stalls, and others used the family bathroom to avoid this. When we tried to voice our concerns to the athletic department, we were told that Leah's swimming and being in our locker room was a non-negotiable, and we were offered psychological services to attempt to re-educate us to become comfortable with the idea of undressing in front of a male. To sum up the university's response, we, the women, were the problem, not the victims.
Imagine that
Yeah.
that a woman voicing concern about not wanting
safety,
to undress in that circumstance, and they sent a psychological reconditioning to correct,
Reprogramming.
reprogramming to correct her reaction, the natural reaction that we want young women to have when they feel in danger. It's diabolical. Congressman Steve Cohen, Democrat, he has a really good solution for this problem.
Transgender people have been around for a long time, and they have rights, and they need to be respected. I read Ms. Scanlon's testimony. I wasn't here to hear it, and I think Penn didn't deal with your situation like they could have and should have in putting up some type of different barriers in the women's area of the locker room. But that's another issue.
Well, actually, that's exactly the issue. And understand that it's like transgender people, of course, transgender people have rights. The problem is that they're saying those rights trump the obvious rights that every other woman in that room has.
Well, absolutely. And hey, even if they erected those barriers, what's to stop Leah Thomas from just going over and going into the same area where the other women are?
And also,
Like,
forgive me, Congressman Cohen,
now.
but we've been talking about this for 10 years when Fairfax County Public Schools already first
Yes.
introduced this issue. And when the idea of some kind of barrier or some kind of separate, by the way, we have a separate space. It's called the men's room. But that said, when the idea
Yes.
of a barrier in the women's room was proposed, we were said, oh, that's separate but equal.
Yep.
That violates Brown versus Board of Education. That's like having a special water fountain just for black people. That's what we were told. You're a bigot if you think. We are told
So
all the
now they're
time,
coming back to those
transgender
ideas.
women are women. There's no difference.
Oh, really?
So here's
Yeah.
Steve Cohen, congressman from Kentucky, who's saying, well, we'll just put them behind a barrier. Well, there you go, bigot. There you go, bigot. Meanwhile, Wesley Hunt, Congressman Wesley Hunt of Texas, he had a different perspective on this.
And I can assure you that my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old daughters will not change in front of biological men. This is ridiculous. I don't care what party you are a part of. If you think that we are all equal and the same biologically, you've literally lost your mind.
By the way, Congressman Hunt, a freshman out of Texas, is African American, so they will be calling him a bigot moments from now, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. No, this whole hearing was so important because, again, it exposes what the left has been doing for years and pretending like, oh, this is just about rights for everybody. No, this is about removing rights, safety, and protection and opportunities for biological women. Women who used to be, frankly, the left used to be supportive of protecting feminism and protecting women.
Yeah.
They have thrown them out of the window for a small minority of a minority with a lot of deep pockets and a big microphone.
Patrice, as you know, you have been leading the charge on this and many other issues through Independent Women's Forum, as your colleagues have. And there's safety in numbers. And when courageous women step up and start speaking the truth about this, speaking their truth, if I may borrow a term, a phrase from the left, there's something very magnetic about that. You attract more people. Over the course of the last several years, more and more women have felt emboldened, felt courageous to come through.
Yeah.
So now we've got Chloe Cole and we've got Paula Scanlon yesterday, and this will only grow these voices, and that's why these issues are finally starting to swing back in the direction of comment.